Here we are.
Hi.
Took a second.
Hi.
Hi, Danit. How are you?
This is great. I'm really excited that we're doing this.
Me too.
And so many people are so excited that this is happening. It's a pity. A lot of people can't be here, but I'm really glad that this is going to be recorded and we'll send out the recording so whoever could not make
Yes,
it.
and I also want to make sure that it does get recorded. I may need some help towards the end of the live if someone wants to send a tip
Yes.
to make sure that it gets recorded and we can post it onto our page so that it can actually get watched for like 24 hours or something.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. We're newbies to the live
I'm so
world.
new at this, and I actually have been fighting coming onto Instagram for a while. And so I'm glad that you reached out to me. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. You know what? I think since I've started coaching parents, I see the dire need that there is just for guidance, for support, for parents to be there for each other, for coaches to be there for each other, for parents.
Yes.
And this is just a really great platform to have. And how amazing is it that Avi agreed to join us?
Hi,
Uh,
Avi. He's saying hi. We're going to bring him on in like a couple minutes. I think it's imperative that because this is going to be recorded, I think that we should talk a little bit about the two of us and how we know each other and how we got into what we are doing. Why don't you start?
sure. For those who don't know me, I'm Danit. Shaina and I go way back. We were really, really good friends in high school. I moved to Hawaii with my family on shluchas, moved back to New York a few years ago, and we weren't in touch, and we picked up our relationship as if no time was gone, like nothing.
Literally,
And
literally. I feel like it's been
yeah,
amazing.
it's really, really special to have friendships like this. Really, really special. So it's something I'm very grateful for. And in New York, I had 5 kids in 4 years, many, many years ago, and so I had 5 teenagers, and one of our kids were really, really struggling, and we didn't even know where to look anymore, and it just felt so hard being at the mercy of other people to help our child. We felt so helpless,
Yeah.
and one day, thank God, we met Avi Fishoff, and he just empowered us. He just guided us, and he helped change our entire lives, our lives as parents, our family, our marriage. And this was just through the most simple, brilliant guidance that Baruch Hashem, things have just really turned around so incredibly, Baruch Hashem,
Thank
that
God.
it actually inspired me to help other parents. And it's just been so beautiful seeing the parents that I'm able to help. And Shane, I'm sure this is something you can relate to, and Avi will share with us soon how it's, parents come to us, like deer in a headlight. Like, what do we do? Where do we go? We don't even know what to do. It's like, and then after working together, you see their shoulders relaxed and they're calm, and
Yes.
they realize this is going to be okay. Everything will work out, and everything does work out.
Yes. So before we bring Avi on, I also just want to say what I find the beauty in like Hashem's hand in all of this is that you and I go so way back. I've known you since we're girls, young girls. And what I find so interesting is that even though our stories are different and our challenges with each one of our children are different, and the struggles that came through us, that we each found Avi separately. I found Avi, you found Avi, and I decided to take on this path of helping other parents. And you decided to take on this path of helping other parents. And when you reached out to me, I was like, you're so good at this, Danit. Like, you're so made for this. And I even saw, like, I'm so blessed that you reached out to me because it's so beautiful to see that you have all these different approaches on parenting. And, everybody, I think, has a mission in this world. And when you find that mission and you know what it is, and you know you're doing Hashem's work, it just all falls into place. And it's hashgacha pratis, really, that I found Avi, and he helped my family and myself tremendously. My whole life completely changed. If I look back to 3-4 years ago, I don't even recognize myself. I do not recognize myself, and everything just it's literally the hands of Hashem. So I'm so glad that you reached out to me and told me that you were like, let's collab, let's do this together. And should we bring Avi on? Okay.
Absolutely. Without
So
further ado,
it's gonna take me a second. I'm gonna just add him on. I really hope that
ladies and
Avi's still
gentlemen,
here.
I
Okay,
don't know
hold
who the
on,
ladies
please.
are
I
or the
also want to say
gentlemen.
before we bring Avi on, because I don't know what direction this is gonna go in, because we have not practiced, we have not talked, but I want to say this. It's a real gift that we have Avi right now, because as far as I know, he does not do podcasts. He does not go on Instagram. I don't even think he posts his own content to Instagram. And I think that it's such a blessing for us that we get this opportunity, and I hope that everyone will get to share in that. So hold on, please.
Stay tuned, everybody.
Literally.
Something pretty amazing is about to happen. And in the meanwhile, I'll do a little plug-in for his book while we're getting him. It's called Raising Royalty. It's pretty amazing. He'll talk about it. I think he's here. Or is he not?
He's
Ah,
here.
there he is.
Hi,
Hi,
Avi.
Avi.
How are you?
Have
This
you been
is so
hearing the
exciting.
praises?
No, I had a call. I just got on, so you want to repeat them?
We'll
No,
send you
it's
the recording.
recorded. It's recorded. We'll send it to you.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Good. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so proud of you guys. And there's no greater thing in the world than to give back and to be there for other people. It's just the greatest thing. The more you give, the more you get, and just beautiful. What am
Thank you so
I
much.
doing here?
You tell us. Well, you know what? I want to find out from you, Avi. First of all, if you can tell us a little bit about this book that
Oh, yes. Oh, wow. That's a
you,
lot of stickies.
I know Danit has all her
That's
sticky
like
notes
when
in
I
it.
when I
I
go
have
through my
I'm a
books. That's what
I
it
have
looks
researcher.
like.
pages folded. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your book?
There's a lot of scientific research done on the difference between a folder and a sticky person. So you should really look into that.
We'll dig deep.
Ouch.
We'll figure that'll be the next Instagram live.
Okay. So,
Somebody asked
yeah,
where they can get the book, Avi. Can you tell them where it's being sold?
in any bookstore, and most bookstores have online purchasing, and Amazon. Amazon's an oldie but a goodie, and it's available. We got rid of 8,000 books, and we just now received printed 4,000 more. And it's Baruch Hashem really doing well. I put a lot of work into it. It was basically over 15 years of compiling and about 5 years of writing. And it's all in Yanei Chinuch. And the idea is to hear what the tzaddikim, the rabbanim from all sides, from all different, wherever they're from, what they have to say about chinuch, regular chinuch, teaching, being a parent, being a teacher, being a manahel, being a rosh yeshiva, regular kids, teenage issues and problems, and all the way down to crisis. We have a Messiah on, I have over 6,000 Divrei Torah and stories. So I started putting it in. This volume has about 700. And it's just inspiring. And you see that authentic Das Torah was very, very focused on not to put down, not to reject, the relationship, the relationship, the relationship. And you see the Mesiras Nefesh of Tzaddikim, such beautiful stories, how they looked at Chinuch, so different than the way so many people look at Chinuch. And that makes us look at kids different, makes us look at the challenge different. Because very often we look at the challenge as this kid is whatever, we don't realize this is the challenge to me. And the Tzaddikim mustered up more Rachum, Chanun, Erech Apayim, more Yud Gimel Midas. That's how they lived. And they never ever changed. And there was never a plan B. Now I gotta reject and yell and scream. It was never a plan B. Just one story that comes to mind. It's very famous. Most famous Jewish comedian, Jackie Mason. So he was a Talmud of Ramesha Feinstein. Can you imagine? A Talmud of Ramesha Feinstein. And he said Ramesha used to call on him and ask him, you like this verse? He held with him. And then his Talmud went off the derech publicly, performed on Shabbos, ate shreif, the whole thing. And before he passed away, they asked Jackie, what was your relationship like with Ramesha? He said, Ramesha, his Rebbe, and Reb David Feinstein, Ramesha's son, was his bestie. They were very close. He said, all the years, they just treated me with care and love, never a word of criticism. Never, how come you're doing this? You're embarrassing. Well, what's going to be with you? Nothing negative. And what it did for me was I realized, okay, after 10 years, why don't they say, hey, this isn't working. Let's change tracks. And the answer is because if you look at all the tzaddikim, there was no other way. There was no be merachek, shake him up, teach him a lesson, don't let him think he's getting away with it, don't let him think it's okay. All of that comes from the Goyim. And when you see story after story from Lubavitch, and Satmar Rebbe and Rabbi Yashiv and the Literature Welt, and when you see it all together, it's just, it doesn't stop. And it puts together in our mind the way that they thought. Every detail you're going to need hadracha, everybody should get guidance and whatever. But the way that they looked at a kid in second grade, the way they looked at it, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer was for Herring, he was testing a class of young kids. He got up in the middle, he walked out, he was pacing up and down the hallway. He came back in after a few minutes, he got up, he was pacing down. The third time, so the Rebbe went over to him and said, Ilamdenu Rabbeinu, teach us, what are you doing? He says, this kid is so annoying. And I went outside of the class to remind myself that kids are people, and I have to be careful about v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, even for a kid. And I went outside and then I came back in, and then he was so annoying. So I went outside again to remind myself. There was never, ever idea that a child can be embarrassed, can be rejected. Such a beautiful story I heard recently. A teacher, a Rebbe, had to go ahead and punish a kid. So he called the kid over and he said, I have to ask you to leave the class for a few minutes, but I don't want you to be embarrassed because you're not allowed to embarrass a kid. I don't want you to be embarrassed. So I'm going to ask you to make me a coffee. Everyone will think that you're just making me a coffee, but you know it's because you weren't behaving properly. So go out for 10 minutes and come back with a coffee. And what's nice is that I did a little video on that. And then a mom WhatsApped me and said, this happened to my daughter today because her teacher, her Mora, saw that video and said, hey, it's such a great idea. Because the kid understands that they're out of line. The kid feels respected, that you're respecting my kavod. You're not throwing me under the bus. I'm not a piece of garbage. They respect the teacher more. They want to behave more. They appreciate, and they learn a lesson. So it's like all wins, and nobody ever thought of that. So when we start
Wow.
to integrate that we have a lot of control that we can have over our kids, but it's not overt external control. It's internal control, and that's what we hear from everybody. And that's what's nice about raising royalty. I spent everything possible to make it beautiful. It's full color. It's a hefta. It's a zach. It's a thing, and it's the beginning of many. Beginning of many, many, many. I have about 6,000. So we're already working on printing. I'm going to start printing volume 2 after Sukkot, and I'm writing
Oh, wow.
volume 3. And it just doesn't stop. And it's beautiful. Any place you open up to, just randomly, I put call outs, and you just get inspired. It just makes us better parents and teachers and Jews.
So can I ask you a question, Avi? Do you mind if I ask you a question on that? Because I know we have some people who are watching. If a parent is doing everything that you're saying, right? They're working on themselves because at the end of the day, parenting and a relationship with a child, it comes from the parent having to do the work on themselves. But what about the schools? What about the schools? How does a parent navigate working on themselves and working on the relationship, but the kid is difficult. The kid is difficult and the parent is bending over backwards, but they go into school and the teachers are not getting it. How can a parent then be an advocate for the kid without, you know, making the kid feel like the teacher's wrong or teacher's bad? How can there be a support for the teacher? And also, what would you recommend?
The parents should buy Raising Royalty as a gift for the teacher, because in there you
Smart.
have
That's a
Good
good
hundreds of
answer.
advice.
stories. You have hundreds of stories of teachers, of tzaddikim, and the Chazon Ish. What happened when he substituted a class? The Bavaji Yosef just said over here. Just saw this story. It's going to be in probably volume 4 or 5. Bavaji Yosef, Maran Chacham Ovadia, right? Svardisha Rav. He had to be a substitute teacher, and they told him there's a kid who's just really out of control. So he walked in and he called over the kid. He said, "You are going to be a great Talmud Chacham and a Rav in Klal Yisrael, and I want you to sit next to me." And then throughout the day, he kept on asking him, "Yeah, you got the question. What do you think about that?" He gave him tremendous cover, like as if he's the Gadol Adar. The kid behaved. The kids there are two reasons that they can't behave. One is they're missing we can control, and the other thing is that they have something wrong with them. But still, if you'll get the best out of them by honor and respect. And if a kid has a fever, he has to go out. A kid has to throw up, he has to go out. a kid who just is reaching his maximum of being able to sit in this little, area, also maybe needs a break, but only with love and care. I'll just tell you a personal story. I had a child who was in sixth grade, and the kid was like ADHD and was, making noises, and the Rebbe couldn't take it. And the Rebbe said, listen, you got to put him on medication. This is 20 years ago. So, okay, the Rebbe says, so we got medication. And this is a kid that never, ever, ever, ever since he's born, so it was easy to see, it's black and white, never, ever had any temper issue. And all of a sudden, within like a week or two, we saw like kicking the door, steam coming out of his ears, explosions. So I realized, take him off the medication. And then I saw the seventh grade Rebbe, the next year Rebbe, at a bar mitzvah actually. And I went over to him. I said, I got bad news for you. My kid's coming into your class next year, and we can't do medication because it didn't work. So he looked at me. He said, Avi, I know. He sees the kids that are coming in the hallway by recess. He goes, I know your kid. He's fine. He doesn't need medication. So I came, my kid went into his class, and he made my kid like his assistant, and he let him stay in the back sometimes. And my kid was getting hundreds and hundreds, and everything was just great. And by PTA, I was standing online with a bunch of other parents, and there were a few kids like him, these cute, very cute kids who just couldn't sit straight. And they all struggled the year before, and they were all saying, like this year, like they're just all doing great because he had extra skill. He knew how to be makar of each kid even more, give them more attention, jobs. One kid was, I mean, he just made up, it was unbelievable. And they all did great. And the result was that on Purim, they went to visit their Rebbe in Williamsburg. The next year and the year after, and the year after, they kept on going back to that seventh grade Rebbe because he saved them.
Mm.
And by saving the bottom kids, they were all smart. So it wasn't even the bottom that they were dumb, the extra needy. The whole class was fixed because the kids were going to learn. They're going to learn, and they get stronger. And he did it without losing out, and he was able to. He had extra kaiches, and there's a lot of fantastic teachers today. It's different than 20 years ago, different than 10 years ago, different than 5 years ago. Rav Steinman Zatzal said every 3 years is a dar. It's a generation. The difference you could ask any fourth grade Rebbe, the difference in the attention span for every 3 years is like totally different. Now everybody's like swipe, swipe, swipe. You got like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. Very, very hard. The attention spans are down. The self-esteem of kids are down for whatever reason. The needs of children are much more. They're not getting a lot of things that they're needing. And it's really, really hard. I have the utmost respect for the Rebbeim who can do it. And like I've told my own children who wanted to be teachers, if you can't do the job without insulting a neshama, then it's not
Mm.
for you.
Do you think that there is do you think that the way that the schools are going right now, because from what I'm hearing, that there's been a lot of positive change lately in a lot of the schools, and they're already changing a lot of the systems and the rewards and the punishments, and also the writing on the name. The writing the name on the board. If you do something, if you're not davening nice, your name goes on the board, and you have to stay in for recess. Like a lot of that old school behavior is kind of getting pushed out. Do you think that's true, or you think there's a lot more room for improvement?
I'm not really an expert on the school systems, and I don't advise schools, and I don't want to comment on that. I'm just from what I see, things are heading in the right direction. The Chafetz Chaim himself said, example of a very, very well-trained general, and he won a lot of wars for the king, and then 30 years later, someone attacked, so they pulled him out of retirement, and he went to battle, and he lost, and he couldn't figure out why he lost. He said, I did exactly what I did 30 years ago. Chavetz Chaim said that you can't use tools that worked 30 years ago. You got to upgrade. So he said that Chavetz Chaim said that 100 years ago. We have many, many stories in Raising Royalty of big tzaddikim who changed everything about the way that they ran their schools 50, 60 years ago. Reb Shmuel Birnbaum Zatzal, the Rosh Hashiva of Mir, the big Sarah Reb Shmuel Birnbaum, told Ramosha Tovi Leaf Shlita, who was a Rav, very chashuv Rav of Guda on Avenue L in Flatbush. And Ramosha Tovi said it over at the TP group, Twisted Parenting group. He said it to the parents. It's recorded. He said that 40 years ago, Reb Shmuel Birnbaum Zatzal told him, he said, and this is when Mir in Flatbush was popping. There was so much Torah, well, so many guys in Kollel. They didn't even have seats. They had like 8 guys standing around the bima, and these are the most chashuva guys in Klal Yisrael, learning day and night. And Shmuel Bar Ram said, he said, Moshe Tovi, you think I can go ahead and give Musar directly to anybody? That ship has sailed.
Mm.
The world changed. Because now, if I want to tell anybody, he was talking about the strongest, right? The frummest, the Kollel guys. He wasn't talking about little kids, fragile people in crisis. He said, now, if I want to tell anybody anything, this, I have to be so careful. I have to go around, roundabout. I'm not talking to them directly. I'm speaking about it. And he realized it. And then he said, the generation changed. It's a very difficult dar. And then he said, maybe it's a tzabrachana dar. It's a broken generation. That means that Reb Shmuel Birnbaum saw cracks in the emotional state of Klal Yisrael 40 years ago, that it's
Mm.
a brach and a dar. And 40 years ago, nobody would have thought that this is a broken dar, a broken generation. What would he say now? He saw what was coming. And now we have a tremendous amount of pain. We have a tremendous amount of problems. We have a tremendous amount I mean, 40 years ago, whoever heard of kids committing suicide, God forbid, overdose, chas v'shalom, drugs are for goyim. How many Jewish kids were drug addicts and selling drugs and cursing and at their parents and being violent and cutting themselves? Psych wards were not full of Jewish kids. Today, we really have a big magefa of kids in pain. That's what I call them, kips.
Avi,
Can you tell us
you
a,
know what I find
go ahead.
very, very fascinating is that, you're saying how all these tzaddikim, things were very different, but it's interesting that your methodology only now, how you say, oh, take a kid to Disneyland, or, the parents have so much power, on the healing of their child. And only now, because I read, aside from being TP trained, I read a lot and research a lot. And only now are psychologists discovering the healing power of the parents and the healing power of fun. And this is something you figured out a really long time ago. And it's
Yeah,
like, oh, now we could listen because, psychologists have said that's what you should do. But this, you
it's
just,
true.
how did you, I don't know, how did you figure this out?
So in 2000, in 2004, 2003, I opened up a home for homeless Jewish kids who had a history of all kinds of bad stuff, drug abuse and alcohol abuse, gambling, addicts, right? That's what they call them. And guys who did violence, stole a lot of bad stuff. And however, I mean, for whatever reason, I decided to open the home. I don't know why. Anyway, and 5 years later, no, about 7 years later, 5 years later, 2009, parents started to reach out to me and say, listen, I have a problem with a boy, but he's not in your program, but we want to throw him out of the house, no problem with a girl. And without knowing each other, they started reaching out to me. And I said, no, I don't work with parents. I like these kids and I work with kids. They said, no, no, please, there's nobody to help us. Because a lot of what happens is when you start down this journey, there's 1,000 people to go to. And then when you get past that the advice doesn't work, if it doesn't work, you feel like there's nobody. There's like, I should have a list of 100 people to refer people to. There's very, very few. And if there's one or two, they're very expensive or they're fully booked for 2 years, how many people are available that I could trust right now? I'm Baruch Hashem able to offer my services for free. It's always been free, and I'm available. So that's a Baruch Hashem the way things are. But I only work on what I call the type of stage that I deal with. But parents started calling me, and I started to speak to them. I started to realize that the way that they were looking at their kid is just totally wrong. And it's just like if you just get around the corner, you just look at it from the other side, it changes everything. So I don't take parents who are in tremendous pain and expect them to live like that because you can't throw your kid out. I change the goal is to change the situation that whatever pushed you to that brink that people would out there say to send your kid away or to go to Utah, whatever, we reverse all of that.
Can you tell us
And usually
more?
very quick.
Yeah,
I
I mean, just
I think
working with you. Yeah, I was gonna
you
say
can tell us
we've
more.
seen the proof in the pudding, not only in our own personal experiences, but working with parents, who meet with you as well, it's just it's miraculous. It's so
Sometimes,
beautiful to see. Yeah, the miracles
yeah.
that we do see. It's really, and even just the
Sometimes
journey.
it's just sometimes most of the time it's just crazy because parents come in. I just had a beautiful family come, parents, such nice people, and they're in this for 7 years. And they sent their kid to a boot camp where he had to earn the right to use toilet paper. If you behave, then first you use leaves, and then if you earn the right, I mean, like really treat him like an animal. And they're wonderful people. They listened to all the professionals and they spared nothing. They spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, psych wards, this, that. And then they wrote a whole list of it makes you hate the kid because every time he came back home, he stole and he broke the rules and the contracts and the sitting and the frustration for parents looking at your kid like he's an ace of Harusha. And sometimes even being happy, like, just let him die, let him get away. Just like I'll be so relieved because it's so painful to live with a monster in my house.
Right.
And they're literally with me 2 weeks. It was after 1 week already that they came back to group and they were like, this is unbelievable. 7 years of hell, 7 years of the kid who saw the way they're looking at him. And all of a sudden, after a 2 day training, which is intense, 12 hours a day, you get new eyes, you get new vision. And all of a sudden, this kid he's hugging his parents, hugging his parents. They would never want to send him out. They don't eat shomrim. They don't eat atzalo. They don't eat anything. The kid needed what he needed, and parents were advised not to give it. It's like a kid who has physical illness and needs emotional love, and they're advised, for the sake of your kid, cut off the emotional love. Now the kid has the physical illness and feels abandoned completely. This kid felt abandoned for 7 years, and I find that they're very forgiving, much more than adults. They're very forgiving. As soon as the father gave him a hug, he was like, he just melted. And this is a tough guy, and he was cursing, and he's an atheist, and he's angry, and he told the parents literally, F you, drop dead. You say, what a Russia. And then all of a sudden, they have that he's a good kid, and he went through something, and we go through the symptoms of trauma, and you see that it's all there. And all of a sudden, he's being looked at with kindness, and all of a sudden the same kid is just a mushy kid. And he told his mom, I just want to spend time with you. It's like, is he still dysfunctional? Yes. But you don't become functional by getting yelled at. Become functional by doing what we do. And until then, they, like the father told me, so great, new parents. He's like, this is so much easier. He goes, I don't know. I hope this is going to work. I think it already worked. But it's just so much easier for me to love my kid than to have to, oh, don't let him this. Close the door. Lock the door. Hide your money. And to look at this kid like he broke into my house, because that's how they feel, like an enemy. And that's how the parents feel. It's terrible. It's useless. Useless. It never, it just doesn't help. I don't want to say never helped anybody. I don't care if it does. Try this first. If
I
this doesn't
remember,
work,
I remember
then you
thinking
could do
so
that.
clearly, like when we were training with you, I just remember thinking, oh, I could do this. Like,
Right.
yeah, this works. This sounds good, right, Shaina?
100%. 100%. I remember when I called Avi the first time, I I literally thought my life was over. I thought my life was over. And to
So
see where
many parents are that way.
and I remember and I remember feeling very validated by you. I do remember you saying, I'm so sorry for the pain you're going through. And I'm like, oh, he gets it. Oh, he gets it. And then to implement it and the training, and I was like, wait, this is genius. This is genius. All of a sudden, all the daggers are out. All the calmness is stored into the home, and the siblings, and although it took time, this wasn't like an overnight 1 week thing, but I want to tell you, if we had a little setback and we called Avi frantic, it's like, okay, I'm so sorry for the pain, but guess what, now do something bigger. And I was like, what, how do you, it's like, the story with like the cows, and you listen to the Ravi. That's how I felt. Just whatever you said,
Bring a
Avi, we
goat,
were just
bring a
bittle to
horse.
you. I was bittle. And it's Baruch Hashem been, I cannot tell you. And now that can I say, Avi, that Baruch Hashem, I started doing this coaching, and now Avi's referring clients to me, people that Baruch Hashem are not in this in a catastrophic kind of situation. But it to me it is the most beautiful way
Rewarding.
and rewarding, but also it is easier than having to fight your kid. It's so much easier.
Yeah, it's interesting that the professional world convinces the parents that you have an out of control kid and you're going to be the one to police him. And now instead of being a parent, now all of a sudden you have to be border control, you have to be dorm counselor, you have to be like, judge, jury, and because they're craving boundaries. They're craving now more than
Begging.
ever. It's like the
Yeah,
kid, they're craving for boundaries. Like
they
the kid's
need
having
more structure.
and it's like the truth is that that's what's good about raising royalty, because all of these things were brought up to the previous rabbanim of all the generations, and they gave us advice.
I'm just going to
There you
put it
go.
up again for the new people who just joined.
We're not
Right?
getting
And you
paid
see,
for this.
We are not.
right? I
Well,
also
neither
don't
is
get paid for
Avi.
Neither
it.
does Avi or
Right?
me.
Makes the three of us. But it's just beautiful to see how many destructive and difficult situations there were, and how the tzaddikim always responded. I don't know about, this is no reason for it. So people ask me like to say, how could I and maybe a few other people disagree with like 10,000 from therapists? And the answer is, I love from therapists, and I send so many people to therapy, but I don't think therapy should have ever been about how to control someone else. Therapy is fix me. Then it became like this thing, how do I control this out of control teenager? I don't think it's really part of therapy. So they started giving advice. Now, how do these therapists know what to do? Because they go to school and the professor teaches them. How does a professor know what to do? Because they do research. Who do they do research on?
Mm,
They do research on Goyim that don't have our family structure. So first of all, we believe that our kids have an neshama and that they're special and that they're different. Okay. Besides for that, these kids have structure. They have like a mom and a dad. They have uncles, grandparents. They have roots. They have most of our kids. They go to shul. There's 100 people in the community. There's people who know them since they're kids. It's totally different than taking, even if it would be a Jewish kid. There's a difference between a Jew and a guy, but even for people who can't see that or don't recognize that. But you're doing research on a totally different population, and you're taking that, which I don't think it works for them either, and you're applying it to a Jewish kid who had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 95% of the kids were so z's and beautiful and wonderful. About 5% were difficult since they're born. This works on them as well. But you're taking this good kid, and then all of a sudden you're looking at them like a monster instead of realizing they they are not a problem. They have a problem,
mm.
and we're going to be there for you. And we're not going to take apart. We're not going to take away the respirator. And it's a very big chaval that parents very often get bad advice that they don't feel comfortable themselves because no parent wants to hurt their kid. So they're convinced that this is what you got to do. Even when it comes to drugs, I've never met, I'm doing this a long time, I never met somebody who was a drug addict and someone said, so how did you go clean? Well, I was doing drugs for a few years and then my parents stopped giving me money. I didn't have money, so I had to go clean. It's a crazy thing.
Yeah.
It's just an insanity. When someone needs something and to numb their pain, you got to get rid of the pain. If you give more pain, they need more numbing. And if you don't give money, if you don't give, of course, there's always questions in any mahalach. So what if you give money? The kid's going to overdose. Fine. You need a lot of expert to guide you in a pikuach nefesh situation. But the idea is get rid of the pain. Who is causing the kid, besides whatever pain there is, they have a new pain that my mother and my father don't like me. I'm unwanted in my home. I'm emotionally homeless, even if you have a beautiful home. And even if they're physically comfortable, I'm emotionally homeless. That boy, and especially girl, is going to jump with anybody who says, come with me. Boy or girl. And I have terrifying, horrific stories that boys and girls and boys, and I'm saying that on purpose, who were taken in and things that we cannot talk about happened to them because they didn't have an option of feeling comfortable at home. So we can't take away their comfort. and make them feel like now you're Russia, now because you don't subscribe and now you're not doing well, now you're bad. That doesn't heal the problem. It just makes other problems that were never part of the problem. And that's why the tzaddikim never gave that prescription, never prescribed that, never said be merafik, never said reject, never said don't supply, never said don't enable. Very big mistake that it's like a Saras Adibris of the Gaisha world, thou shalt not enable. The opposite, the Chazon Ish said, enable as much as you can. Because as long as it's mutter, and as long as there's an expert saying it's not dangerous, obviously we don't want to hurt anybody, right? We're not going to give somebody the keys to a car when they're drunk.
Of course.
People take concepts and they like say, oh, so you should then. No, it's done very carefully. But as much as you can enable without endangering anybody and without going against halacha, which is almost everything, almost all of the time, when you enable, they laugh and they giggle around you. They're happy to see you, and this is their home. They want to be around you more often. They start staying home. They stop going out. They stop needing all the bad stuff. They stop falling into traps of terrible relationships, etc., etc., etc. It's so simple. You be the supplier under guidance and under Das Torah. Everybody who comes to me has to have a Das Torah before they come to me because I'm like, why should we wait till we have a Shaila and then scramble? You need to have your Rav go through. I have over 300 Askamas, call whoever you want, and then they write a letter that they paskin any Shilas. I don't paskin ever. I
Okay.
just suggest, this is what I would suggest. Let's get on the phone with your Rav. If it's ever a question, halacha or hashkafa even, let's say you're from Monroe, you're Satmar Chassid. So it's a different hashkafa than if you're from Young Israel. So
Right.
that daya needs to say yes. This is okay for you and your family, and it's been going very very well. I've never gotten a no from any idea that I had that I can remember with any Rav, because when we go through the history, we go through the situation, it's very very simple. And even if it's not pikuach nefesh, so I only supply and support and enable the kid according to where they are. They don't get worse from that. And either most people don't understand it because the concept that they have is your kids are as bad as you will let them be, and you have to stop them from being bad. And that's not the Jewish concept. Our kids are good. They're toiv. They're nefesh. They're mamish. They're good. They're good. And I've proven that in our group. You see, not just people who come for themselves. Everything's open. So we have hundreds of parents that give testimonies watching this happen all around. And then we see that there are some families that struggle for years because of deep, 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 deep trauma. And those parents are holding their kids, carrying them with love through those dark years of trauma that the kid has, and not adding on more trauma to the already traumatized child. And we could see it based on the behavior and based on how quickly they turn around. It's a crisis center. It's crisis. But we laugh a lot,
A lot.
and Baruch Hashem,
Would
a lot of laughter.
would you mind telling everybody how you determine who you take under your guidance?
Sure, sure. So really, I only work with parents if their child is no longer religious openly. I get a lot of calls of kids that are Makal Shabbos in the house, but they walk outside or they're still in a school. If they're not in a school, except for a few schools that send to me, they have to be not in a school and openly what we call kid at risk. Funny hair, cut the payas, not sneers, like that. If somebody saw the kid, this kid is not part of the system. That's enough. Now, unfortunately, along with that, most of the time comes a lot of other problems. But that's the gateway. That's the door. If the kid is not from, I get involved. But it's been a while since someone came to me that the only problem was not from. So many kids are, we have eating disorders, cutting, suicidal ideation and tendencies. We have tattoos and violence. Violence. This is all kind of my specialty because so many of these things turn around so fast, and the ones that don't turn around fast, which is a small percentage, the parents also have a tremendous relief. First of all, with the 24/7 guidance and the group, hundreds of people that are there for them, and also knowing and feeling for their kid and being there for their kid and having nafshek shur benafshek, a soul connection to your child.
best.
and seeing them in their pain, and they're not angry at you and you're not angry at them. The same as if, God forbid, they had le'olenu, a physical illness, that we would never turn on them. We wouldn't decide, all of a sudden they have bad midos. And this is not the problem of today's generation, is not bad midos or taiva, or, it looks like that. But the problem is not that you didn't play enough Uncle Maishi and Marvelous Midos machines to your
If
kids. The problem is
only it was
not that,
that simple.
right?
Yeah.
The problem is not that they're such huge ballet taiva that I can't stop. They can't stop watching movies all night. That's not the problem. The problem is not so many things that it looks like. The problem can be solved if we follow what the Chazon Ish told us, along with every single Das Torah. They said it so clear. Embracing royalty. It's a commercial. It's an infomercial. But that's why I put it out there. Look at what Rav Pam wrote. Look at what the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote. Like, why do we need to be smarter? But if you have time, like 2 minutes, the site that I like to go to is the Chazon Ish, because nobody argues on the Chazon Ish. It's foolish to argue on the Chazon Ish. And he said what to do, but he also gave an example. So he said 7 words. Yinasu l'mashcham ba'avoisais ahava. Try to pull them into you with ropes, cords of love.
Hmm.
And then he added, "V'lo litchaisam chalila." God forbid, chalila, do not reject them. Don't push them away. That's the playbook. Anything that brings them close to you is good. Anything that rejects them is bad. In a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20, you will not succeed by any rejection. Any chalila, God forbid. So what do you mean? A kid comes in, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? That's the playbook. If you're a nurse in ICU, you need to know what's medicine and what's poison. Medicine is yanasu l'mashcham ba'avoisais ahava. So we're talking about a kid that's Machal Shabbos, and he says, pull them in with ropes of love. But then he's going to think that it's okay. Why should he ever become better? You see that the Chazon Ish was not worried about that, because that's not the psychology of how this works. But if he's accepted and he's going to drive around and we're going to give him cholent and say, oh, Yaki, it's so great to see you. Oh, Chani, you look so beautiful. Why should she ever get better? That's the Goyish mentality. The Chazon Ish said, no. Try to pull in. God forbid, do not reject. That means even in your mind, even in your eyes, even on your facial expressions, if the kid feels rejection, I always say that rejection is in the heart of the beholder. If they feel rejected, you went against the Chazon Ish. But here's what happened. He brought it out in a story that's printed in Maisa Ish that just makes it so clear how far this goes. It was a story of a parent that had a son who was Michal Shabbos B'Farhaseh, Rahman al-Islam. And he went over to his father and he said, Dad, I want you to buy me a car. So the father said what most people would say, I'm ready to buy you a car on one condition. What's the condition?
You don't drive it on
Don't
Shabbos.
drive it.
You don't drive it on
Hmm.
Shabbos. I mean, I'm not going to put a gun in your hand. It's someone who's driving on Shabbos is Michal Shabbos B'Farhaseh. He's like a guy, has a din of a guy. Ka'akum l'chol davar. I'm not going to be paying for you to do that, right? And the kid said, no deal. I think that also that explains like the kip mentality, because most, if they're so bad, he should have said, it's a deal, take the car and then just drive it on Shabbos. But he was, no, a lot of our kids are so honest, they won't do it. He said, no. And the relationship got worse. When this question came to Rabbeinu the Chazon Ish, he was meyayitz the father, he advised the father. He said, it's kedai, it's worthwhile to give the car to your child, l'loy shum tanai, no condition. Listen to these words. Ki dafka b'derech zu tegadel hashpa asay. Because specifically by enabling the sin, tegadel hashpa asay, your influence will grow on the child.
Wow.
So we have the Gaisha world telling us, do not enable, don't give them, don't buy them, don't have them, it's bad. And then we lose all influence. And then they feel homeless. They feel like they're snipped away from their connection. I don't know where I live. I have no people. A guy on the street says, yo, you look beautiful. Less is better for me. Great, no problem. She'll go out and she'll do whatever she does. They're craving attention. They get it on the street. They get it here. They get it there. And then the parents cry, oh my gosh, look what happened. They're never supposed to crave any more attention than what mom and dad can give. And he says, Dafka b'derech zu. You're lucky that your kid asked you for a car and didn't agree, because this is the way to save the kid in the future, that the kid will become everything you want him to be. They become healthier emotionally, because what trauma does, it makes you feel alone. It makes you feel worthless. It makes you feel empty. You can't enjoy anything. When your parents then don't like you, it's a death sentence. It's an emptiness that can never be filled by any drug.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it also helps spiritually. So for those people who are throwing away their kids in the name of God, God is saying through the Chazon Ish, nobody's ever going to come back to this religion if you hurt them in the name of God against the Chazon Ish. And that's what people are doing. Not just against the Chazon Ish. Every Rav and every rabbi says the same thing. But here, the story was so clear because everybody would say, of course, I'm not going to enable. Who said? You should enable. As long as your rabbi says you're allowed to, you must. And I went to Reb Gershon Edelstein Zatzal, who was a Talmud of the Chazon Ish, the Shiva of Panovich, and I went to Rav Moshe Hillel Hirsch about buying not sneeze clothing. And he said, yes. About if a boy brings a girl into the house, should you throw him out? Look at the video. He said, chas v'shalom, to throw the kid out. I asked Rav Moshe Hillel Hirsch about buying you go to a bowl game with someone with a kid who's not from, someone not from, without pikuach nefesh. Look at the video. And they say, can you buy me a Frank? Buy me a burger, right? Yeah. He said, no problem. We're not used to thinking like that.
Right.
You need
Because
to ask your rabbi.
how could we join in with that?
How can
Why
we
would I do that?
enable?
How could we
How can we enable?
enable?
He says, Dafka b'derech zu tegadol hashpa'asei love, because by being close and showing that even though you clicked unsubscribe, I get it and I respect you for your decision. That makes Torah first of all makes you somebody that I can connect to, and they want to connect you with the parents. They want their parents. They want their family, and that just makes the whole thing better. It makes the whole struggle better all around. Best thing for the other kids. There's no fighting. There's no screaming. There's no hatzalah. There's no shomer. Did you ever hear of a TP parent calling shomer
Ne-
hatzalah? And maybe
Never.
1%.
I don't
Never.
Maybe
even
one.
think
Very
you would
soon.
know. You would know the 1%. We, in all the parents that we've met, never. We've
Never.
never heard a story.
Because when you're giving your kid everything that they want, then they don't get violent. I had a kid who put a knife to his father's throat. Everybody said, Ben Saira Myra, we gotta hang him. And they came to me, and he's married. Happens to be that I know him. He knew about me, so he came over and gave me a big hug. He's like this teddy bear, and he's a yummy, delicious, sweet kid. And it's not the same kid who put a knife to his parent. He was feeling so much pressure and hatred. And how come you this? And again you this? And how come you that? Stop it. Nobody ever became from because they had to do certain things to conform out of respect. Where does it come from? Respect to me that you dress according to the way that I want in my house. Not a Jewish concept.
No.
Many
I
stories
also, I
and
have to tell you,
come
Avi,
to mind. I
even from
just
like personal experience, when you have that connection, it affects all your kids in the most
right. That's the idea.
beautiful way. Parents, it's just when parents think the opposite.
Right.
They think, oh, right. I mean, I'm sure you
Right.
have plenty of stories. Just they think the opposite, that it's going to
Well,
affect the
I think
kids in a
everybody
bad
thinks
way.
the opposite. I think everybody thinks the opposite, and it takes the really the guts of listening to authentic Das Torah, because it's so interesting that even current people would say, well, it's affecting the other kids, it seems very scary. They don't know how to jump over the scariness and make it not scary. The way that you make this kid not scary is by stop scaring him, is by stop making them feel that you're not their parents, and taking away the authentic unconditional love that kids are supposed to feel from their parents. And I don't believe in unconditional love of the goyim, but I just want to say that for however that means, just stop the war. Imagine a kid walks in and the father looks at him like, I wish you were dead. Get out of my face. Nobody, you could take your most healthy kid, treat him like that for a month, he'll be suicidal. Nobody can tolerate that. And
Exactly.
adults are not that different.
Right.
If somebody goes to shul and your Rav looks at you like that, how many times is it going to take until you're like, I'm out of here? Why do we think that kids could tolerate being hated and disgusted? Rav Pam writes it so clearly that I saw two families that had kids that went off the derech. Both of them were chashuv b'nei Torah, and one of them They lost their kid. He said, until today, they never came back. And the other family, he said, showed this kid tremendous patience, sablanos. They never, you have to read it inside. What's the name of the sefer? I forgot.
On the
Senior moment.
tip
But
of my
it's in Raising Royalty.
I'll look it up.
All
Hold
this
on one
stuff is.
second. Hold
And
on. Let me look it
he
up.
says right. You can go in the back, there's an index, look up Rav Pam, you'll see the story.
Okay,
And
hold
you
on.
can tell me the name of his sefer.
Okay.
And you bring it, and it's like Rav Pam. Rav Pam was Mayatzis Gedolei Torah was the head of the Litish world. We don't need to be smarter than that.
Right.
And Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote what the Rayatz said to do. The Rayatz answered this question so clearly: how to deal when somebody is sinning, how to look at them, what makes them come back. I mean,
Can I tell
it
you
doesn't
what I
matter
love
where you
about
go.
can I tell you what I love about your book? Is that when you look at the index and you have every single like Gadol Hador in here. So it
Right,
doesn't matter if you're
right,
Lubavitch, it doesn't matter if
right.
you're Bells, it doesn't matter if you're, modern
Satmar,
Orthodox,
modern
Satmar.
Orthodox.
Just look it up. Look up
Listen,
the Rav that you want, and you'll find a story that backs up Avi's Mahalech. That's it. It's so simple.
100%. A guy told me that he came over to me and he said that when he was 65 years old, he came over to me about several years ago. He was passed away young, this guy, unfortunately. But see the Shasatmar guy. He says, I want to tell you a story. He says, 50 years ago, I was 15 years old. And I had an older brother who was 22 who went off the derech. He joined the police force. He had an Italian girlfriend. It was the worst. And my father went, finally, they tried doing it on their own and whatever, but finally it was terrible. My father was breaking down. He went to the Divrei Yoel, the Satmar Rebbe, and he took me inside to the Rebbe. So he's telling me I was there at 15 years old, and the Rebbe told him what to do to deal with my brother. Whatever money you give all your kids, you give this kid double. Anything that you can give him to supply him, to be there for him, you do whatever you can. When he wakes up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or he comes in, whatever, you smile and you compliment him and you make him the closest possible and you just love and shine your love at him. And we look at the Satmar Rebbe as a kanoi and he was anti, yes. But this is what he said consistently, and I have from Diane Gruber also, and many stories of the Satmar Rebbe. It was always the same thing: extreme kiruv, even to have a television in your house. And Hershel Spinka said it, and Satmar Rebbe said it. And this is while there was a big war in those days about TV. That was like the worst thing in the world. Today would be like a mitzvah to have a TV from 1970 in our homes instead of everything else. But in those days, they were like eradicating it, and they told parents, no, your kid, keep him home, put a TV in his room. Now, he told me, this guy, he said, my brother wanted to buy a tractor trailer and drive cross country. Not a very Jewish car. He wasn't going to do mitzvahim, put tefillin on at the stops. So at the truck stops. And my father, he said, did not have money. He borrowed $5,000. So this is 50 years ago from when he told me. So it's almost 60, 65 years ago. That's like today, like $50,000,
Yeah.
right? He borrowed it. He borrowed it, took the cash, put it in my brother's hand, and said, if you're buying this vehicle, I want to sponsor it.
Wow.
And he knew he wasn't doing mitzvahs in that car. So what was the end? He said, my brother came back, became frum, became satmar. And today, he's a great grandfather because at that time, this guy was 65, that guy was like 72, 73, whatever. So it's 50 years later, he's a great grandfather. The beautiful, big Satmar family. It doesn't end there. He tells me, my father passed away this year. I'm in the year. I'm saying Kaddish for my
Mm.
father. He said, my father was sick for a year and a half before he died. And we all, brothers, sisters, like 14 kids in the family, everybody was taking care of my father. But nobody wants to be in a hospital on a Shabbos. He said, I'll go. 2 day Yontif, I'll go. 3 day to be in a hospital, I'll go. He said he took care of my father day and night. Like I always tell parents, you'll see, this is the kid that's going to take care of you when you need them. He said he took care of my father day and night. And my sister said to him, oh, you're taking care of Tati because you feel guilty for the agmas nefesh and pain that you caused them? And he said, guilt? No, I'm taking care of him because I know that he loves me more than all of you put together.
Oh, oh,
And then he
wow.
started crying and he said, it's true. The last week of my father's life, he couldn't talk. He had no energy to talk. He didn't say a word to anybody. When this brother came in, he mustered up a few words and he spoke to him
Wow.
because he put in and invested so much into this kid, and this kid felt it. Every kid feels our love, but when you go out of your way to do so much extra than what they deserve, and they're causing you pain, and you're giving them, and you're against everything that you believe because you want to be there for them, the bond, the nafshik shur b'nafshi, is so deep that, yeah, the last words he ever said in his life was to my brother.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Many, many stories like that. We have to have the vision of 50 years from now, 100 years from now.
Avi, we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you if you would be
Are you kidding?
comfortable.
I'm just getting
No,
started.
we could keep going, by the way.
We're
We
good.
could totally
It's
keep
your
going, but
time. You're
I
right.
just have a question for you. I have a question. I put on my stories today. If anyone wants to submit questions anonymously, would you feel comfortable answering them, or should we?
I'll answer them. I'll answer them anonymously. If it's
No,
an
because we know that
anonymous question,
you.
you get an anonymous answer.
Well,
Okay, let's hear what
okay,
the answer is.
okay. So the question is, someone asked if a
How
child
much
is
time?
really struggling. If a
4 minutes?
child is really, you talking to me? Okay. If your
We only
child
have
is really,
4 minutes left.
well, I mean, we
Yes.
So
can.
I think
There's no timer.
if
There's
we
no timer. If it's
if
going
we
well, we
only
can.
have no, because I only have 4 minutes
Okay.
Yes.
left. So I don't think we should answer specific cases.
Okay.
If you have a situation, I'll answer everybody's questions.
Okay.
Find the right person to guide you. Don't make stuff up on your own. Don't decide that you know. Don't ask people for advice who are not really experienced. We would never do that with physical illness. Don't listen to what anybody tells you who has not saved at least 20 people in your situation. Don't listen to a family member who's sure that you need to this, and you just ask them and say, I'm just curious, did you ever help anybody in this situation before? Uh, no. So why are you so sure? It's like, would I give advice on how to bake challah?
I don't know. Do you bake challah?
No. But I feel very strong. The eggs should go last. First, you make the challah, and then you put the eggs. I just have a gut feeling. People do that with neshamas. People go ahead and they tell people, you have to throw the kid out. You have to put down your line. But are you an expert? Are you taking responsibility? Have you done this for 20 years? Did you ever save anybody? Go out and save 5 people, and then just 5. I don't think that's a lot. And then I think you're entitled to, we'll start hearing your opinion. People will give opinions. So find an expert of your category. Just like I don't give specifically earlier stages, I get about 90% of the calls that I get, I do not take because I don't consider myself an expert. Another time, the patients, the in and out, sometimes a kid needs different things. We have wonderful people like we have here on this podcast, on this Instagram, well, I don't know what it's called,
It's called a live.
live,
It's called a live.
alive. Okay, I just dated myself. Well, at least I'm dating someone. So alive, on this live, right? We have wonderful people, and I have a list of many other people. Find somebody who's not, if it's regular chinuch, find the biggest expert in regular chinuch. If it's already not regular chinuch, make sure that you're really addressing it. I actually find that there are some parents that panic. There are other parents that do the opposite, and they're too calm, and they don't even realize how far their kid floated away from normal. And sometimes you got to be like, this is really not, write it down and go to somebody and be like, is this normal? And they'll be like, no, this is dangerous stuff. I have parents who normalize a kid, a 14-year-old girl getting drunk. No, it's only